Welcome to Slinky's Liquor Pond and Video. I am your host, KC, here today with a very special guest, Mr. Andrew Jones, writer and director of The Curse of Halloween Jack. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, great to be here.
I really enjoyed the film. It was a very good story. I like the whole revenge slasher Halloween.
Yeah, well, thanks. It's we just try to have a bit of fun with it, I think, and not take it too seriously, and hopefully people enjoy it.
Yeah, I think they will. I was wondering, where'd you get the inspiration for Halloween Jack?
Well, basically, we were obviously a lot of our ideas are discussed with our distribution partners for digital media, and they were kind of looking for Halloween-based stories and things like that. So we just kind of thought, well, we want to have a character with the mythology is a little bit around Halloween and things like that. So I just pitched that forward, and I think it was in a discussion with me and Tony, who's the head of 4Digital, and Steve, who's in the marketing there, and we just sort of came up with some of the ideas, and then I went off and sort of wrote that into the story then, and it's nice to actually have that kind of input creatively with a distribution company because often filmmakers and distributors are kind of seen as being worlds apart, but I think we have a very good relationship, and a lot of our creative ideas come from discussions with them.
Yeah, yeah, it was a very cool idea. Definitely enjoyed it. How'd you come up with the the look for Halloween Jack? Because he was really creepy looking.
Yeah, that was something I kind of put it together from because obviously that was the next part of it. For them, they were interested in, well, how's he going to look, and I come up with sort of different ideas, but I mean the main sort of inspiration for it was sort of a scarecrow type of look, because I love some of the old scarecrow films like Night of the Scarecrow and The Dark Night of the Scarecrow and things like that. So we were I was kind of thinking along those lines and just put a few different ideas to them, and they sort of selected different things from different pictures, and then we put it together between the costume department and the makeup department, and yeah, we it was deemed to be a cool looking villain. So I think that was the big part of the first film was the Legend of Halloween Jack, which Curse is a sequel to. I think the big takeaway everyone got from that was that he looked very cool on the cover of the
Yeah,
DVD.
yeah.
So that was kind of, I think, the big attraction to the film. That he was a cool looking villain, and it. We kind of tried to give him a bit more to do in the second film because I think that was what people wanted to see him.
Oh yeah, definitely. The cover art was done really well. That's what drew my attention to it.
Yeah, I mean, they always do excellent artwork. I think that because that's the key with low budget films is it's very hard because they don't with low budget indies they don't put big marketing bucks behind advertising the film or anything like that because obviously it's not a big studio release. So your only chance to advertise to people is the cover really, or I guess the trailer on some streaming platforms too. But mainly when you're talking about physical like DVDs in the stores, your poster, your cover is really the only thing you've got to advertise the film on. So they always do a great job, our distributors 4Digital with the covers, and I think that's the key thing of why we've managed to do a lot of successful films because we advertise them well with our artwork.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I really liked it. Like the way his eyes glow and everything is very creepy.
Yeah, yeah, that was fun. It was a nice little fun thing that we only used sparingly in the first film, but we used it a lot more in the second one because it looked quite cool and give him a little bit something else.
Oh yeah, definitely. Haddonfield was mentioned. Was that like an homage to the old Halloween 1978?
Yeah, we try and I like to slip in little references to things because those are the films I grew up watching, really, and that's the kind of films we try and make now. Even though we're very low budget, and we have limited resources, we always, I'm always thinking about films that I grew up watching through the 80s, stuff like Halloween and Friday the 13th and all of that. So we always try and, throw a few references in there just for fun.
Oh yeah, it was very cool. I definitely picked up on a couple of those. There was some pretty interesting kills. Did any of them kind of stand out while making the film?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, obviously, we tried to just have some fun. I thought, put in there was a kill where he rammed the mobile phone into a girl's mouth who had been kind of obsessed with taking selfies and stuff like that, and that was a little bit of a nod to kind of what a lot of people find, I guess, interesting about the modern generation, and that they're kind of obsessed with their phones. Some people, so I think it was just a little bit of a nod to that, where Jack actually kills someone with their phone. So that was quite fun, and we tried to tie some of the kills into some of the character traits. So the guy who is always eating, he ends up sort of eating this kind of severed finger in a plate of fries and stuff like that. So we just kind of it was very tongue in cheek, and we just had a laugh. I think when you do low budget kind of B movie stuff, you shouldn't take yourself too seriously. It's like when you're a filmmaker doing that kind of material, you should just have fun with it. And I think that's what we kind of did. We didn't want the kills to feel like they were too, real or anything. It was more about just kind of having a little bit of fun and, sort of, being a bit tongue in cheek with it.
Yeah, it definitely was that. The cell phone kill was definitely my favorite. That was
Yeah.
makes you laugh. It's good. It's really good, and the story behind the whole movie is great. It's just this one, like you don't really focus a whole lot on the kills. It's more of the story behind it of how this guy was done wrong and he comes back for revenge on Halloween. Done very well.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think we try to give him a little bit of a mythology and a little bit more of a backstory than maybe in the first film, and then in the second one we had a lot more sort of going on with the character and the links to other characters and things like that. So I mean, you got to. That's the thing with when you try and do like a series of films, you got to kind of have a little bit more story each time, I think, and give him a little bit more of a link to some of the main characters too.
Oh yes, it was done very well. Yeah, I absolutely loved it. The Hunter, also another thing. It looks like it might have been another homage. His name was Duke. Was that like an homage to Jason Goes to Hell?
Yeah, I mean, if that was definitely kind of there was also there's also like sort of bounty hunter figures in like Texas Chainsaw 2 and like Devil's Rejects and all of that. So it's kind of a homage to that whole trope where you give the villain a sort of like determined hunter type of character who's like going after them, and that hunter character seems to know all of the answers to how you destroy this villain, and I always liked that in films. I thought it was great when like Dennis Hopper played the guy in Texas Chainsaw 2, and he was after the Chainsaw family, and then you had obviously Stephen Williams in Jason Goes to Hell. He was great in that, and they were always kind of fun characters, and we kind of thought it would be interesting to do this guy who was just kind of this sort of a bit of a drunk, but he really knows his stuff about this guy, and he's out for revenge, and Yeah, it was quite interesting to give the character a little bit of a nemesis, but obviously we went a bit of an amusing route with it in that they when they face off, he's kind of a little bit out of his depth, against Jack. So yeah, it was just one of those homages to the tropes of the genre.
Yeah, yeah, it was great. I really, really liked that. It was done very well. A lot of stuff in this film that really stood out. One thing that I did notice for a slasher film, it was shot like very classy with like no nudity or anything. Was there any particular like reason for that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting for us with nudity because we did a film a few years back, which was I guess more of a sort of drama, supernatural type film called A Haunting at the Rectory, and in that we really went all out with nudity because obviously it is a staple of like the exploitation B movie genre, and a lot of people have a lot of it in these films. But we had a lot of it in that film, and we actually faced issues with some of the retailers who were going to stock the DVD, and I think it's kind of how the business is going, and that obviously in terms of physical sales, the people who really are the only game in town are the supermarkets in the big stores, the chain stores in like UK and US, and one of the retailers. Obviously, the buyers look at the film before they choose to stock it, and saw this film Haunting at the Rectory and asked us to actually they didn't like the amount of nudity in it, and basically asked us to cut some of it before they agreed to stock it. And it kind of put me off a little bit because I think that you don't ever want to have your film kind of censored in any way. So I've always been a little bit reticent to put too much nudity in films since, although I know people enjoy it, and we possibly could have done it in a slasher film a little bit. But the other thing as well is it just didn't seem any place for it in the story. That was the only problem I've got is, and I shouldn't have this problem really as a B movie producer, but I can't. I need to find a story reason for why someone gets naked, and it was hard to find one in this particular story. There didn't seem to be a great deal of place for it, because none of the characters were really paired off too much. They were friends. The younger characters were friends, and um, obviously there was a lot more kind of emphasis on there's this sort of comedic double act between the two guys, and one of them is openly gay, and the other one is not too savvy to that. So I kind of just was more interested in the humor between the teens, and there just didn't seem to be any place for nudity, and obviously that prior experience has kind of meant I don't put a lot of it in my films.
Yeah, yeah, I understand, and you're right. It didn't really have a place for it at all in this one. It had plenty of comedy. I really enjoyed that. How'd you go about like coming up with like how you were gonna try to get that over with like being a slasher, like not too much?
Yeah, I think it was just kind of I was thinking about you know uh, I suppose with the younger characters because there was some older characters in it like the detective who was like more intense and things like that and was going through like and obviously the bounty hunter as well, and they were a bit more intense, so I just thought, well, the younger characters need to be a bit more kind of humorous, and so it doesn't feel like it's getting, so it kind of offsets it a little bit. So it was it was fun to just imagine, I guess, what kind of what it was like to be that age again, and the kind of things they would talk about, and yeah, just knowing some people of a younger age, I know they talk a lot about some of the racier things that they do talk about in the film, and it was just kind of making some observations about that based on just trying to be humorous, really. And I think I think that was it was good to do that because the older characters were a bit intense, you know.
Oh yeah, definitely. Went over very well. I really liked it.
Okay, thanks.
What was your like your favorite decade of horror if you had to pick one?
Well, yeah, I think it's the 80s because that's just what I grew up in. I was born in 83 and then I started watching horror films when I was like 5. So, kind of late 80s was when I started watching horror films. And so at that time, you had all of the major slasher franchises were still going. There was still, I think, so it was about like 87, 88 that I started watching this stuff. And you still had like Nightmare on Elm Street going, the latest Halloween, the latest Friday the 13th. So these films were, the new entries in these series were still coming out. So I remember that whole time, and it was very influential on me, I think. And because I mean, watching them at the age of 5, you'd think I would be, kind of scared of it. But what happened was, I asked my parents to watch these films at a young age, and they allowed me to on the condition they'd sit there with me and explain to me how the special effects were done and try and make me see it was like a form of entertainment rather than real, which is, great of them because it actually got me interested in the filmmaking process. And I'd read the credits at the end and think, what do all these people do? This is amazing. And I just remember that being a really nice time in the 80s of a lot of practical effects, and it was interesting to see how they were done. And I think it was really fun to see how, particularly looking back as well, it was kind of unprecedented in the early 80s, which is before I remember, but looking back at all of those films around, sort of 80, 81 after Halloween and Friday the 13th had come out, you had that sort of slasher craze where there was a whole period of like 2 or 3 years where these really low budget kind of almost grimy kind of horror films were playing in mainstream cinemas, and that's amazing. And I don't really think we'll see anything like that again. I think it was kind of its time, and obviously, now it's all different, and it's different platforms and things like that, and it's all home entertainment and streaming and stuff. But yeah, I don't. I think it was a very unique time in the 80s, and it was great to see how they would churn out those slasher sequels almost every year. And now they take years just to get one of them off the ground. And I don't think we'll see another decade like that again.
Yeah, I don't think so either. The '80s were my favorite as well. Actually, really, yeah, it's the best decade out there with all the different ones that came out. Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. It just goes on and on.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of hidden gems as well that I still discover to this day. There's a lot of stuff I remember watching as well. Even the films that were kind of rip-offs of the main franchises were great. I enjoy the hell out of those. I was watching a film, in the last year, rediscovered it, Bad Dreams, which had Richard Lynch in it as a like a cult leader who gets they do this kind of mass suicide, this mass fire burning thing, and then he sort of appears to the survivor, from the dead. And that was a that was sort of a Nightmare on Elm Street rip-off, but it was actually it's a really good film in its own right. And so even the rip-offs of that decade I love. And it's sort of nice to, sometimes I rediscover a lot of them or discover them for the first time because now people are on a nostalgia kick, and you see a lot of these titles getting released by like Arrow Video and 88 Films and all of these sort of labels, Scream Factory, and people like that. And it's great, it's brilliant to see them all. A new generation can see these films now.
Yeah, yeah, it's really great, and there are a lot of them on like Amazon Prime and Tubi, and some are even on YouTube. They're pretty
Yeah,
much like very available just about anywhere now. Really great.
yeah.
For your film, where can we find this?
Uh, so this is in America, I think, is still out of Walmart and possibly some of the other retailers. It's on Amazon Video as well, and obviously the DVD is on Amazon too. I think it's possibly on quite a few streaming platforms, but I'm not sure of those. But yeah, physical copy, definitely Walmart or Amazon.
Okay, awesome. Do you have any other projects that are you're working on that you want to talk about, or any other movies you've done in the past that you want people to check out?
Yeah, I mean we've got a few coming out. Our next year, obviously early next year, our next films will be the Jonestown Haunting, which is a kind of a look at the Jim Jones Jonestown sort of real life events, but through the lens of a survivor who's getting visions of surviving the mass suicide and things like that. So that's a bit different for us. That'll be out next year. And that'll be followed by a Killer Next Door, which again is a bit of a different one for us. That's more of a Rear Window type thriller. It's actually based on the real life case of John List, who inspired the Stepfather movies, but no one's really done kind of too much on him as a real figure. So we've got a film about him which focuses on a neighbor who suspects that he's this fugitive family killer in this suburban neighborhood and starts watching him. So it's a little bit like Rear Window or Disturbia, that kind of thriller type of film. And then the one we're shooting, I start shooting that next week, is The Haunting of Margam Castle, which is Margam Castle is a sort of landmark in Wales in the UK where I live, and it's sort of this big haunted kind of manor house. And we're actually shooting at the real place, which is supposed to be actually haunted, so that should be interesting.
Oh yeah, I bet.
And we've got some nice names in that who were in like they've been in things like the old Hammer horror films, people like Carolyn Monroe, Jane Merrow, and people who've been in some really big stuff. Garrick Hagan, he was in Star Wars, and we've got a really good cast for it that mixes sort of new talent with sort of older character actors. So it'll be very like a kind of old Hammer film, really, because you'd have that gothic castle location and these kind of classy British actors in it, and yeah, it should be fun. It'll be nice to do that again. That's something a bit different for us, and then that'll be out next year as well. And then we start shooting something else then in February, which we're just deciding on at the moment. So we stay busy.
It sounds like it. I'll definitely be checking those out. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. Had a nice time talking with you about the Curse of Halloween Jack. I hope everyone goes and checks it out.
Oh, thanks. No, it's been great to chat.
We'll see you next time right here on Slinky's Liquor Pond and Video.